Hey guys, my name's Pocket and welcome back to League 101. Now today we're going to be talking about Nunu and Willump, but not just Nunu and Willump, we're going to be talking about Nunu and Willump in the mid lane. Now this is a fantastic pick right now, and we're going to go all the way from Nunu's abilities, then into runes, builds, how to play him in the mid lane, say as opposed to the jungle, and then into some tips and tricks that are really going to help you master this pick. So as normal, you can check out the video description if you want to get timestamps to go to anything specific, and then we're just going to get straight into it. Okay, so we're in the practice tool and I'm going to go over all of Nunu's abilities and his passive and just tell you exactly how they work. Now this is more about game knowledge. We're going to talk about how to use them later on, but it's really important to just know exactly what you're dealing with and exactly what his kit is. So to start off is his passive. This is a passive that gives you and your ally bonus attack speed and bonus movement speed, and it gives you bonus AoE damage on your autos. And it lasts for 4 seconds and it procs whenever you do any damage to a champion, a structure, or a large monster. And what can proc this passive is denoted by this little sword spinning above their head, and it has a 10-second cooldown per target, which means when you proc it on one target, you can't proc it on the same target again for 10 seconds. So as you see here, I proc my passive, I get this little buff at the bottom, and the sword goes away. Now in 10 seconds, that'll come back, and then I can proc it on him again. Now, if you are lucky enough to proc it on, say, 2 people, then it will actually stack. So you'll see it resets it, but it actually goes a lot slower because it's stacked. It doesn't have a timer, which is unfortunate, but yeah. Other than that, it's really, really simple. Really easy to get used to this passive, and you know it's a bit more jungle focused, but it's useful in lane. And like I said, we're going to talk about how to get the most out of it in lane and in team fights a bit later on. Okay, so now we're going to talk about Nunu's Q. This is a really simple ability. It has you take a chomp out of your target, and then it heals you as well. So it's kind of like 2 abilities though. If you attack a minion or a monster, then it will deal true damage, and the damage it deals is set. It's set at a number that scales with the level of your Q. Nothing else. It doesn't scale with your items or your champion level or anything like that. It's kind of like Smite. It scales with the level of your Q, and it just does a base amount of true damage. And then it heals you, and how much it heals you scales with over 100% AP. So this is one of the things that was changed that made Nunu mid lane truly viable. And then if you attack a champion, it will do magic damage, and then it will also heal you, but it will heal you scaling with AP, but a lot less, something like 60-65% AP. So let's just get into it and show you exactly what it does. So if I chomp a champion here, you see it does magic damage, just a little blue hit there, and it heals me for a certain amount. And then it has a really great sound effect. And then if you attack a monster, you see it'll do true damage. So that's that white number there, and it will always do 340 true damage at level 1, as you can see there. And like I said, it heals you. You'll notice you get healed more off the monster than you do off of champions. I'm just run away from this fella now. So yeah, it's a very simple ability, really quite easy to get to grips with. Just remember that you're going to be healing more off minions and monsters, especially if you've got more AP, because it scales with a huge amount of AP than if you attack a champion. So think about that. If you're using it just for your healing, then maybe you're going to be wanting to attack a minion or something like that. Okay, so now we're going to talk about Nunu's W. Now this is a very unique ability, but it's actually quite easy to get a hold of. I suggest jumping in the practice tool if you've never used it before, just to get to grips with it. Basically what you do is you press W. Now you don't have to hold it down. This is something that I had to learn. I thought you held it down to go forward when I first picked up Nunu ages ago. But then you control it with your mouse. As you can see, you can turn with your mouse there. And as you roll the snowball, it grows in size and you gain some movement speed. And it rolls over all minions, so you get ghosting effectively. And it deals damage to them. And the bigger the snowball is, the more damage. And then as you can see there, when it hits a large monster, a wall, or a champion, then it will blow the snowball up, knocking the champion up, or the large monster, and then it will stun them when they come down as well. And again, that knock-up duration and that stun duration depends on how long that you were rolling snowball and how big it got. Now this is a really useful ability. Like I said, you control it with your mouse. It's something that you kind of have to get used to, but the screen zooms out and it makes it a lot easier to control it. And yeah, it's just pretty unique. There's a couple of little tips and tricks with this. We'll talk about that later. But yeah, other than that, it's actually fairly simple. So just get in the practice tool, really try it out, and you'll get used to it in no time, I'm sure. Okay, now we're going to talk about Nunu's E. Now, noticing a trend maybe? This is another very simple ability. It's basically point and click, and what it does is it has you fire 3 snowballs. Bomb, bomb, bomb. But you can actually activate it 2 more times to fire 9 total. I didn't do it quick enough there. It'll tell you how long you've got with a little border around the E here. But you go bomb, 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 bomb. Each one can go in a different direction, but it will always fire 3 every time you press E. That's a total of 9 snowballs. Now, anybody that is hit by 3 snowballs over the total course of this E will become snowbound, and they'll get a little icon over their head. And this slows them, but also if they're in your aura at the end, as you see there, if they're in your aura at the end of it, then they'll be rooted. And it's a really great ability. It gives Nunu a lot of safety in lane as well. And yeah, it's just pretty simple. If you miss or they manage to dodge one of the snowballs of the first barrage, you can do a second barrage and make sure they get rooted. And do remember that you can fire them in any direction. This is important, but there is a timer on it. And yeah, just a very simple ability. We'll talk more about how to use it and how it helps her in mid lane a bit later on, but it's really, really simple. Okay, and now lastly, we're going to talk about Nunu's ult. Now, Nunu's ult is, yet again, fairly simple to understand. Basically, you press R and you create a massive blizzard around you, like so. It charges over 3 seconds, and then it explodes and does a load of damage to everybody inside it. Now, there's a few things to note about this. Firstly, it also slows everybody that's hit by it. Now, I can't really show that in the practice tool because these little fellas don't move, but it's slowing them, and the damage and the slow both scale with how long the R has been up for. So if I pop it really quickly here, see it doesn't do that much damage. But if you let the whole thing go, say, halfway, then it does a bit more damage. And then if you let the whole R channel, then it does even more damage. Pretty simple. The longer you charge it for, the more damage you do. And also the more they'll be slowed by. Now, the other thing, and another thing that was changed in 10.13 to make Nunu a bit more viable as this kind of AP build that we'll see later, is that you also get a shield when you press R. And this shield scales with HP and with ability power. So it's very important to understand, because when you press R, you'll be rooted. And I'll show you this. If you move, it will instantly pop it. So that's kind of good. It doesn't cancel it. It does pop it immediately. So you still do some damage, but it won't allow you to continue to charge and do that big damage. So if you move, it stops it. And this makes you very vulnerable because you're effectively rooted yourself. And that shield really helps to keep you alive if you're in the middle of a team and you want to get a massive ult off, right? Yeah, and it's just, again, pretty simple to understand. Maybe hop in the practice tool if you want to try it out and see what does and doesn't cancel it. But pretty much you're rooted and you can't do anything except for channel your R. Okay, so now we're going to go over runes, and this is my rune page, and it doesn't deviate much from this. So I'm going to go over this fairly quickly, but I will tell you exactly why I take each rune. So we start off on Dark Harvest. That's because you can't poke enough to get use out of any of the sorcery runes. Phase Rush can be used in the jungle sometimes, but it's just not enough damage for mid lane. And you don't take the kind of short trades or have the kind of kill pressure to make Electrocute necessary. So we take Dark Harvest. It's a great rune, it's a good amount of damage, and it scales well. So it's a good keystone. Then we go on to Cheap Shot. Nunu's got tons of immobilizations and movement impairments, so you can always proc this consistently, which is great. Then you can either go Eyeball Collection or Zombie Ward. Now, the lower your rank, the more I suggest Eyeball Collection. It's more consistent that way. But as you go higher, taking Zombie Ward and Oracle's Lens level 1 straight away can be great for vision control, especially considering Nunu is going to roam a lot, as we'll talk about. So you need to have that vision control to make sure they don't know you're coming. So yeah, it's that choice between them. I wouldn't take Ghost Borrow ever. So yeah, Zombie Ward or Eyeball Collection. If you're very low rank and you're not expecting the enemy to be warding much, then Zombie Ward will be less effective, basically. And then we're on to Relentless Hunter. I always take this. It's great, good amount of movement speed, scales well into the late game, but a huge amount of movement speed to help you roam and gank and stuff. Some people take Ult Hunter, especially if they've got a very tough lane and they're going to be shoved in a lot, so not going to be roaming much, and they're going to want more kill pressure in their own lane. That can help, but I take Relentless Hunter every game, personally. And then to synergize with that, I take Sorcery Runes. I go Celerity, buffs all of your movement speed bonuses by 7%, and then it also gives you 1% extra movement speed, which is great, again, for the very same reason as Relentless Hunter. And then I go Water Walking. This is 25 movement speed in the river and scaling AP in the river as well. So that's also good. All of this synergizes really well with your ganky roamy playstyle. So I would suggest taking these every game. If you are not very confident on roaming with Nunu, then you can take Presence of Mind to give you less mana issues, and Coup de Grace to synergize with Dark Harvest, because both of them do damage to low HP opponents, so they go really well together. But personally, I go for Celerity and Water Walking. And then double adaptive and a defensive. Usually for me it's armor or magic resist. I don't like to go the scaling health rune. So yeah, very simple rune page. That's that. Okay, so now we're going to go over itemization on Nunu. And it's fairly simple, but you'll end up building a kind of AP tank hybrid. So I'm going to make sure you know exactly when you should be building what items, and we'll go through everything here on my item list for Nunu. So starting items, Doran's Ring, 2 health potions, Warding Totem, pretty simple. You want this every time. The mana regen, the ability power, it's great. So no questions there. Control wards are always good on Nunu. You want good vision control because you're going to be roaming a lot, and we'll talk a bit about that in the next sections. But yeah, pretty simple starting items. Now for boots, I normally go Sorcerer's Shoes, but if they have a full AD comp, then I'll go Tabby, and if they have a lot of CC, then I'll go Merc Treads. Again, pretty standard boot itemization there. So onto the core build, the full items. I will almost always start with Hextech Proto Belt. I actually can't think of when I haven't started Proto Belt on Nunu in quite some time actually. So I'd say this is the 100% build. It's a really great item. It's very, very cheap, as you can see. Only 2,500 gold. Gives you health and ability power, as we talked about. Nunu scales with both of those, so that's great. Gives you a bit of cooldown reduction, which is also great. And it also has a nice little passive. We're going to talk a bit about this later on, but it's good for wave clear. And it gives you a bit of mobility, you know, getting in and out of situations. So again, great item. 100% build right now on Nunu. And then secondly is Dead Man's Plate. Now this gives you a passive that stacks movement speed, and as you can see here, once it reaches 100 stacks, you get this little thing behind you, a little trail. And this gives you up to 60 extra movement speed, which is just great. It also gives you a quite significant amount of health, 425, and 60 armor, which is great, especially into kind of AD assassin mid laners like Zed or Talon. This kills them, so this is a really, really great item into those kind of builds. But even if it's a mage mid laner, that movement speed, if you're doing well, it really helps you getting up and down river and ganking a lot. So that's another great item. And unless they are a full AP team, like even if their only physical damage is their ADC, I still build this item. And then thirdly in the core build is Spirit Visage. Now this gives you health, it gives you magic resist, it gives you health regen, it gives you cooldown reduction, and that's all great. But really the reason to build this item over any other is the healing received buffed by 30%. Which is huge with your Q. It's such a huge increase to healing off your Q that it's just, you've got to always be thinking about Spirit Visage. It's not the only magic resist item you should be thinking about, and we'll talk a bit about the other options in a bit, but it certainly should be up there on the list. The extra healing, the extra sustain, the extra ability to keep yourself alive in fights is just too big to miss out on. So again, I consider this core. Again, if they have a full AD team, then maybe I'll forgo it. But if they have just even a little bit of magic damage, this is my go-to magic resist item for sure. And then we also have Dark Seal. Now, Dark Seal is something that I have begun building on Nunu every single game. Usually, I used to just build it when I was ahead or when it was an easy matchup, but now I build it all the time. Just the potential to snowball and the great new AP scalings is just a really good item. It's a very efficient item, even with 0 stacks, and you just get a few stacks on there and it's fantastic. And then you can also build it into Medjais. Now, if you get 10 stacks on your Medjais, you'll get 10% movement speed, as you can see there on the passive. Dread, which is really, really great on Nunu, as we talked about. Don't need to go over why movement speed is good on Nunu anymore. But yeah, this is another great item. So if you are fed, you're doing very well. Getting a Medjais is great, but I think a Dark Seal is a good early item anyway. It also gives mana, Dark Seal. Just gives you 100 mana, which is nice very early on to help you survive in lane and use your Q more for sustain. And then we're on to the late game items. Now, there's a lot of choice here, but you've only normally got one slot. Let's say you don't get Medjai's, you've got 2 slots. But if you've got Darkseal or Medjai's and you're doing well, you've only got 1 slot, so you really have to think carefully. So I'm going to go very quickly over each one to try and help you understand when you should build it so that you'll be able to make the choice yourself. Because it's really important for you to itemize yourself. You can't just go, oh, well, they have X champion, then I build this. Or I want to do this, so I'll build that. You really need to be thinking about who's doing well on their team, what your problem with their team is, how you can maximize your efficiency here. So to start off is Fallen Rail. Now, this is just a great armor item in general. It gives you 80 armor and 250 health, which is just pretty nice tank item. But the 2 things that make it really, really good is the Grievous Wounds passive. Firstly, it's just great to sustain because it applies that Grievous Wounds. So this is just really good if they've got a lot of healing. Mundo, Aatrox, Vlad, right? If they basic attack you, then they'll get a large decrease to their sustain, which is just a really great item. So if they've got heavy sustain, if they've got a lot of healing, maybe enchanter support or a lot of innate healing like those champions I said, then this should definitely be up your list very, very high. Also just good into a lot of auto attack heavy champions because it's dealing damage. That leads us on to a second reason it's good. That damage that it deals back to them procs your passive. So if you get up into a team, let me keep myself in here. So if you get up in the middle of a team and they're all attacking you, they will all receive damage back if they're doing basic attacks to you from this passive on Fallen Rail, and that will proc your passive, so you and your nearest ally will get increased attack speed and movement speed pretty much for the whole of that fight. If all 5 of them attack you at the same time, you get 20 seconds of increased attack speed and movement speed for you and your ally. So it's definitely something to be thinking about. It's a really nice little synergy, I think overlooked sometimes, and it's something that I'm always thinking about. And then secondly, we've got Gargoyle Stoneplate. Pretty simple, it's great into mixed comps. If you're getting up in the middle of them, it gives you 80 armor and 80 magic resist if you're near 3 enemy champions. So, you got to be thinking, are you team fighting a lot? Are they a mixed comp? Go for this. If you're splitting a lot, if they're splitting a lot, if there's not a lot of big team fights happening, and also they have a heavy AD comp or a heavy AP comp, then don't get it. Pretty simple. Then there is Abyssal Mask. Now, this is kind of like the Swiss Army knife of items. It gives you health, gives you mana, gives you magic resist, gives you cooldown reduction, gives you a mana rejuvenating passive, which is great on Nunu as well. But really, the aura nearby enemy champions take 15% more magic damage is what you'd be building this for, in my opinion. There are a lot of other great items for magic resist, and really this is the kind of offensive tank option if that's a thing. Especially if you've got a heavy AP comp, because it will buff the damage from your teammates, which is really great. Then you need to be thinking about this. And then you got Frozen Heart. This is similar to Abyssal Mask as an aura, but it's an armor item. Gives you mana as well, and it gives you 20% cooldown reduction, which is huge. But this aura is a defensive one. It reduces the attack speed of nearby enemy champions by 15%. And this is a permanent decrease, so if they're near you, they're getting reduced attack speed, which is really, really great. It also is just an absurd amount of armor, 110. It keeps getting buffed for whatever reason. So if they have assassins that are fed, this is a fantastic item to build, because armor nukes assassins. Because they don't really want to be building percentage armor penetration till late game, because they'll want that Yumu's and they'll want that Dustblade. So this is another great item into that kind of team comp. It's also great in team fighty team comps as well. Like I said, if you're applying that aura to a whole team fight, then it really does matter. And then these two are very, very situational. We'll start with Randuin's. It gives you health and armor, which is great, but the real reason to build it for sure is the passive that gives you 20% less damage taken from critical strikes. So if they have a crit heavy team comp, for example, Tryndamere top lane, Yasuo mid lane, and Jhin bot lane, then you really need to be thinking about this. It's a fantastic item, 20% less damage from their basic attacks, which is huge. And then there's Adaptive Helm. Also very situational, but also very effective. Gives you 20% less damage from the same spell if it hits you again within 4 seconds. So this is awesome into damage over time champions like Malzahar, Brand, Teemo, and also things like Nico, where her Q, if you stand on it, it will pop again. It will reduce that damage as well. So that's a really, really good passive, but only into people that do damage over time or have very, very low cooldown abilities that they're spamming onto you. And then very, very lastly is Rabadons. I never used to build this on AP Nunu, but I've started to recently, and I've actually been having quite a lot of success, but only when I'm very ahead, only when I have Medjais. The synergy with Medjais, because a very highly stacked Medjais, well, max stacked Medjais gives you 145 AP, in fact, and this gives you a 40% increase in ability power. So it's a really great item if you've got that heavily stacked Medjais and your Proto Belt. You end up with an absurd amount of AP, and it's just really good for snowballing and carrying. But I wouldn't suggest it unless you're doing very well and you've already got that Medjais, in my opinion. That's when I get the most out of it. And then, yeah, late game, go for Elixir of Sorcery. I know it's a bit of a hybrid build, so I just wanted to say don't go for the tank one. Elixir of Sorcery, in my opinion, is definitely the best late game pot for Nunu. So yeah, that's it. Okay, so let's talk a bit more about Nunu and specifically the mid lane and how this is going to differ from jungle and other roles that you might play Nunu on. So I think the first thing we should speak about is CSing and wave clear and this kind of stuff, because obviously it's very different to the jungle. In the jungle, you can quite regularly and consistently pop your passive, which gives you AoE, but in a lane, you're kind of don't really have wave clear. You're thinking about just auto-attacking them. You might miss CS quite a bit because of this. You don't really have a good, consistent wave clear. And as we're going to talk about in a second, when we go for roaming and such, like wave clear in the mid lane is important. You're either going to want to be counter-pushing that enemy mid laner that is just shoving you in constantly. You want to be able to CS at the tower nicely, and you might want to be shoving them in so you can get out of your lane without missing too much and go and roam and gank. So the first thing that we think about really when we're talking about wave clear on Nunu is using your W. So the waves meet here and you're thinking, I want to get rid of this wave as quickly as possible. So you just roll your W up and then bomb. But then you just roll through and you don't do too much damage. You're doing 1/3 the amount of damage. So the first trick is that if you cancel your W early, as we talked about, it will pop on the first thing. So if I just get my W back, if you cancel it early by pressing W again, it's going to pop and then it'll explode. But again, that doesn't do too much damage because we don't really have time to ramp it up. So my first little trick on Nunu is to ramp the snowball up in your own lane by turning around. Your turning circle is just small enough to be able to do it. And then you can turn around and just roll it up to lane and then pop it. And you see there I didn't get quite far enough, but because the waves had shoved a little bit. But it will explode and it'll do a lot more damage, and as you can see there, it one-shot a caster minion. So this is a really good trick on Nunu. It's something you should try out in the practice tour. It's really not that hard, especially if the wave shoved already and you can get a little bit inside that little alcove. And then you just turn around and roll up your lane. Really simple. Boom. And then you see, you can obliterate a backline like that. And then obviously you've got your Q. I like to save that for when I need it for sustain or cannons because I suck, so I want to make sure I get them. But you can use that kind of whenever you want to secure a minion kill. As we're looking here, I'm level 7, so I've got a level 4 Q. It's doing 820 true damage. Now, the last thing about wave clear, as we did talk about that it's useful for that, is Proto Belt. I like to have that on number 1. So Proto Belt is very, very good for wave clear. Let me just get a new minion wave here. So you see the caster minions in the backline and you'll just destroy them with Proto Belt. You can secure the cannon, and then really the only thing you've actually got to CS is the melee minions. So really, really good as well. So now that we're capable of actually clearing our wave, let's move on to number 2. Okay, so what we're going to talk about now is roaming. So let's say you've got your wave shoved in. We'll just imagine that that's shoved in. Let's do that. Okay. You got your wave shoved in and you want to roam around. So usually I'll be going top lane personally, but obviously you can be going wherever you want. I just prefer ganking top lane as Nunu because I think he's very good in 2v1. But let's say we want to come up top lane. You don't want to walk up too far because you don't want to be seen here, because when you start your snowball you actually get slowed just a little bit. See, your movement speed goes down to 207 now. So you actually get slowed. So you want to be using your snowball as soon as possible. So let's talk a bit about that. Now this is very early on, level 7, level 1 W. We've got no boots, we haven't even gone back. So where should we be starting? Well, usually it's about halfway down the river. This will give you the ability to get all the way to the enemy tower, should you want it. So if they've got somebody CSing under tower safely and you're thinking we can tower dive him, he's low, right, then that's where you're going to want to be starting, about halfway. But let's say they've got somebody, you know, he's just CSing, the wave's frozen, he's just slowly CSing. You can start back in this bush. I like this because often there's a control ward in this bush, so it's nice to be able to just come in and as soon as you check, no control ward, no vision, boom. So you just roll up, and this will get you about to the middle of the wave, even at level 1W, so you can, boom, crash into him and complete your gank. So really, very early on, we're going to be looking to start our snowball about between here, about halfway through the river, and this little pixel bush here. So very, very simple. But now let's say it's got a bit later. We've got boots, and we've even got stacked runes, because of course, we've got Relentless Hunter probably. So let's look at this now. So as soon as we leave our mid laner's vision, as soon as we get into that bush, we can just roll up river. And you can already notice we're getting much faster and we're going much further. And if they have frozen the wave, then you are already going to be able to take that ball all the way up to a frozen wave, all the way up to the middle. And that's starting it straight away. And of course, if we were to go back to here, and like I said, it's always good to check this pixel brush, in my opinion, because there's often a control ward in here. So we come in here, no control ward, start it straight away. And you can see, look, we're already much, much faster, well into the 500, 600, and we can comfortably take that now under their tower for a tower dive, should we want to. And it's interesting to look at the timings on this, right? So let's say we're leaving at 10:55. So we leave vision at 10:55. They might be pinging at this point, probably not in solo queue, right? And we're up here in 10 seconds. In less than 10 seconds, we'll be in their vision. And in 10 seconds, we'll be attacking them. So this is a really good thing. This is why I like Relentless Hunter on Nunu, especially with this water walking and celerity, because it takes less than 10 seconds to leave your mid laner's vision. They might think, oh, he's coming to get a ward here or a ward there, or, you know, hit the vision plant or get scuttle or something, and then suddenly you're up top lane and you're getting a pretty easy kill. So yeah, it works exactly the same on bot lane, of course. The map is symmetrical, so we won't go too much into that, but you can also fly down here should you want. So now we're going to talk about a few little tips and tricks for Nunu and a couple of little combos. So the first off is E and ult. Before the E actually ends, you can cast ult. Now I know this guy's going to be rooted, he's very slow already. The ult slow will apply on top of that. So if you can get right up to him and then just press ult, he's going to get rooted, he's going to stay right close to you. As we talked about, if somebody's really close to you and you've got Abyssal Mask, this is a huge amount of damage if you can max charge your ult, and it's just a really, really good little combo there. Another thing that I want to talk about is you cannot use any active items like Proto Belt or any abilities while you're in W, which means you cannot flash while you're in W. And this has caught me out a few times because maybe you're being ganked and you think, oh, I can W away. Because if they don't have any hard CC, you become unslowable when you're Nunu. So if they don't have any hard CC, maybe they just have slows, then you can W away. They can't stop you really. You're going to gain so much movement speed that you'll get away. And often I thought, oh, this is the way out. And then you thought, uh-oh, I need to flash now. So either you need to flash early and just be safe, get out of there and then W, or you need to cancel your W to flash. You can't flash to cancel. I'm spamming D if you could hear that. You can, however, press W again, like we talked about for wave clear, to cancel it and then flash immediately to get out. This is just something that's got me killed a few times, so I feel like I have to mention it. you need to realize that you cannot do anything when you're in W. So you need to be thinking about whether or not it's the best way to get away. So now I'm going to give you a little tip about sustain in lane. And what happens is, say you've got a very aggressive pokey laner like a Lucian who's going to be dominating you early on, and you're sat right far back. If I move up to try and eat this minion to get some health, he's just going to kill me. So he's sat there, but your jungler's here and you want to gank. A little tip, if you can do it, if you can time it properly, let's say your jungler's doing scuttle and he's pinging in, is to come in here, just eat that, and then roll into lane. It'll give you a significant amount of health, even at level 1 with not much ability power, and you'll be able to get enough health to be helpful, come in and effectively gank your own lane, which is really nice. Something that I really like on Nunu. It's similar to Pyke. Being able to gank his own lane is one of the great things about Pyke. And yeah, this just a cute little tip, using the jungle to your advantage even in the mid lane. And kind of on the topic of using the jungle to your advantage in the mid lane, another thing is that, like I said, we're level 7 here. We have 820 true damage, which means that at level 7, because you'll probably be a level up on the enemy jungler, you're going to easily be able to outsmite him effectively. Your Q is doing much more damage than his smite at this level. So it's a really good idea to just take a skull. Just go and take the skull. This leads on to my next point, which is objective control. Now, despite the fact that you're not a jungler, you're going to want to make sure that you're at objectives. And this is for the exact same reason. You want to be able to outsmite the junglers. Your Q is doing more damage than the jungler, so you are more able to secure that objective. Let's say you're doing dragon, right? The jungler is going to have a smite that's doing maybe 500-600 damage, and you've got effectively a true damage smite doing 820. So you're going to be able to secure it better than your own jungler and better than their jungler as well, of course. Even if their jungler is doing very well, he's not going to be ahead of you until very late on, more towards the kind of mid-teen levels. So it's really important as Nunu to be thinking not only about scuttles for CS and vision for yourself, but also for the objectives for your team. So the last thing we're going to talk about is using a brush to hide your ult. This is a fantastically fun thing to do on Nunu and something that you definitely need to know. Basically, if you're in a brush and you ult, the enemy cannot see it. So as you see here, the Yuumi walks up, they're being slowed, but they won't be able to see it. And I'll show you that from their point of view in a second. So as you can see now, I'm the Yuumi, there's a Nunu in that brush, they're ulting. Now I'm being slowed and I can tell I'm being slowed, but I can't see anything. Then you take a huge amount of damage and then you die. This is something that you absolutely need to learn on Nunu, and it's super fun. And we're done. I hope that's been really helpful, and if you've still got any questions or anything you want to ask me about, then you can catch me on stream. I'm live every Friday, Saturday and Sunday. Ah! Say hello. Ow!